dehydrates you because it takes a lot of water to break it down. So one of the things I could say is, okay, if you drink a 12-ounce can of beer, drink 24 ounces of water, and that'll help with the dehydration factor. So as an example, to continue on with the tolerance piece, reverse tolerance happens when you have liver damage, so you have less liver to detoxify the alcohol, and you get drunker.
That's scary.
Okay? And that's so that's why I ask people, especially if you're students here, and you come to me and you say you have a history of alcohol abuse, okay, go to student health, get a liver enzyme, a liver panel. See if there's elevated enzymes. Okay? Because hepatitis, what that means is that there's an inflammation of the liver. There's lots of things that can cause hepatitis. Alcoholism is one of them, a viral infection is another, an allergy to something is another, right? Mm-hmm. So how you experience things, all right? So if you're, I use myself as an example. So I grew up in LA, hanging with rock stars and hanging in high school with, movie stars, and so we would get the best dope that there was in LA, fit for rock stars. So I have a fairly high tolerance for weed, right? That's semi-permanent. But if I go on abstinence, not smoke 4 years or whatever, and then suddenly smoke again, wow, really stoned, right? Same thing that you report, right? And it doesn't mean that your tolerance has gone away, it's just that your nervous system has adapted to not being on it every day. And so that when you do finally use, wow, it's really dramatic. But with some substances like alcohol and marijuana, the body remembers. Because it's a nervous system adaptation. That's what tolerance is, right? So you remember. Okay. So the first time you get stoned or drunk after a long time of not, it's really dramatic. But then if you continue, then you quickly go back to where you left off, wherever that was, right? So, for example, then drinking on top of meds is an addictive behavior because of the tolerance. When I say potentiating, it means usually, so for example, I think we'll have a drug interaction slide shortly, but so anything else is not moderate drinking. So 1 dose a day for women, 2 doses a day for men, defining doses as we've defined them already, okay? So when the tobacco industry talks about responsible drinking, notice that they don't use a number. Right. Notice they don't explicitly tell you to stay under legally drunk. They never give you a number of drinks. Drink responsibly. Think before you drink, Miller said. Yeah, okay. Well, after a few beers, or depending on what your body weight is and your blood alcohol level, you're physically incapable of thinking. Because judgment requires memory. So how could you be responsible? So again, that. So what I'm showing you for alcohol, actually, we haven't really done for other drugs, but it's theoretically possible to do it. We've done it for alcohol because we've studied it so well, and there's an obvious blood alcohol level that can be measured. With marijuana, there's too many constituents. We haven't developed a field identification test that tells how sober you are. The best way the cops can do is basically by taking a blood test, which only shows that you smoked within the last 30 days, not how stoned you are today. And it's just presumptive if, your car reeks, oh, well, you're driving under the influence of pot. Right? Doesn't say how stoned you are. Oh, I drive better when I'm stoned. I get speeding tickets under the influence of caffeine. So the information I gave you, I went on every unit of alcohol, but just so people can make an informed choice. But this information is not available by law. So if consumers were informed of this, they'd probably drink less, which is why I'm doing it. So legally drunk, there's no rational reason to exceed legally drunk, and so it's not that legally drunk is set too low. It's based on pharmacology, which is a strict weight to dose relationship based on blood volume in a medically defined ideal weight body, hence blood alcohol level. So regardless of your weight, you have the same amount of blood. So gaining weight doesn't mean you can drink more, because you have the same amount of blood. That's why we use the medically defined ideal weight. Okay? Your tolerance changes because it's a nervous system adaptation, and your nervous system is designed to change according to what's in the environment. And if you're changing your environment, it's going to change. The nervous system tolerance and your experience of how high you are or how drunk you are. All right? So this is why you might not feel drunk even when you are legally drunk. For example, first time I got stoned, I didn't know what being stoned was like. It's not like, just to basically explain to people who've never done drugs or gotten drunk. Okay? If you know what getting drunk is like, that's one thing. You can explain that to people. But if you get stoned and you try and explain what getting stoned is like to somebody that's only drank alcohol, they have the psychological term is referent. Okay? A referent is a mental, emotional object. You know what a pen is. You know that this is a highlighter, not a ballpoint, right? You have a referent for pen. Table, another referent, all right? Stoned is a referent, okay? Frying on acid is different than being stoned or drunk. And until you've done it, you have no referent. Going into labor, having a baby, no referent if you're not male. Okay? So essentially, your tolerance changes. So why you might not feel drunk when you're legally drunk is that you've gotten used to the feeling of altering your consciousness this particular way, and you might be legally drunk and not feel drunk because your tolerance has changed. So, for example, what I call induced ignorance addictions. So addiction depends on the concealment of the whole truth. And so the whole truth is you're a capable being that has the wisdom of the universe within you already, and addictions reinforce the illusion that you do not possess those inner resources. So addictive organizations, social structures, social policy and practices ensure addictions will continue by creating dependence on outer solutions to inner problems, rather than even develop or even acknowledge that there are inner resources to solve those inner problems. All right? So if I basically say, okay, somebody was talking to me today and they said, well, I was depressed and I was taking, Wellbutrin and blah, 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 as a result of, going through a divorce. And I said, you were angry. Well, yeah, I went through a divorce. I told you that. Right. But you stuffed your anger. Did you have to stuff your anger in the marriage? Well, yeah. Okay. You're depressed because anger wants to explode. To stuff it, it's energy. You want to stuff it. Takes more energy than the anger. That means you have less energy to live with. Therefore, you feel depressed. So how does Prozac help that? It just screens out the feeling of being tired and depressed. What about the anger? It's still there. So you feel depressed. So we're treating your depression without necessarily going to the root cause of what is making you depressed. Now, not all anger is sublimated anger. I mean, not all depression is sublimated anger. But that's an easy one to look at because lots of people are angry for lots of reasons, right? So, from the prevention guerrilla point of view, it's easier to influence and educate people rather than change institutions, especially when institutions profit from promoting addictions. It's easier to give you a pill than to teach you to breathe right. and eat well, which we'll get to. Okay, so as an induced ignorance, so the safe and effective dose for aspirin and ibuprofen and acetaminophen, it's printed on the container. So the safe and effective dose for alcohol for social lubrication, I've defined as 0.02. Based on what the science of, okay, 0.04 is legally drunk for a commercial driver's license, 0.08 is legally drunk for a regular driver's license. Okay, so 0.02. If you stay below 0.02, that's good. If you stay below legally drunk, that's good, but then you have to know what that is. Now, I go by what I call first responder rules. Okay, 9 to 5, I'm in my office. I basically have to respond to a crisis because people are walking in with a crisis. I go out in the community, that's pretty much the same thing too. Oh, you're that TV guy. Oh, you're this, you're that. All right? No, you can't. I'm not going to do counseling on the street corner. I'm just here getting coffee at Starbucks, yo. I'm off. But I want to be able to respond to a life or death situation because stuff happens, right? So I never, because I'm a normie, I never drink more than 1 or 2, knowing that for me, legally drunk is 4. Ever. Never go beyond 2. Ever. Because you want to be able to respond to a life or death situation. Right? So what if everybody responded as a first responder? That means, okay, you stay below legally drunk or you don't use. Right? Basic. All right? So giving you that information is helpful, right? So we've already defined these. This particular meme here, so alcohol should only be consumed in less harmful doses according to what is referred to as the 0124 protocol. Now, this was promoted in higher education circles about a decade ago. And it's basically low risk drinking. That is, so no drinking at all if you're below the legal age and you have no family history of alcoholism, you're not pregnant, no mental or physical illness is made worse by it. So if you meet those tests, then 1 dose per hour, no more than 2 doses in a setting, and doing that no more than 4 days in a row. And that's low risk drinking. Now we can't say that drinking alcohol is without risk. We can't say that. There are docs that you still might even say that for a pregnant woman, moderate drinking is okay. Wrong. But they will say that. There is no known safe dose for a fetus with alcohol. Basically with any drug. Because baby and mom share the same blood system and the same liver. Whatever mom does, baby does twice of. Which if the substance is toxic, that's kind of bad news. And it stays in baby's system longer because baby's blood is being filtered by mom's liver. And the most toxic stuff goes through the placenta like it ain't there. It's not a barrier. Like alcohol and meth, etc., etc. So, induced ignorance addiction. Basically, we don't know these common substances that are addictive. We don't necessarily know how dangerous they are. So, as an example, I'm using this for a college audience. Right? The alcohol industry makes alcohol in single-serving binge doses. So, Long Island iced tea, 4-ounce malt liquor, 3 pints in a brew pub or a pitcher. So, for example, how many doses in a pitcher of beer if the beer is, say, Hammerhead or Terminator Stout, to mention McNimmons, right? 7 to 8. So if 7 ounces a dose and there's 64 ounces in a pitcher, then there are 9 doses in a pitcher. Now, most people are not going to do the math about how much I'm drinking. They might think about, well, I want to get my share of a pitcher, but they won't necessarily think about, relate to what dose that they're drinking, right? 5.3 doses if the pitcher is Bud Light. So if you assume everyone is drinking gets an equal amount, or every individual simply stays below legally drunk, that's easier than trying to figure out, well, how much can I drink? Well, why don't you just set a limit and drink less than that? Okay, stay under legally drunk. Yeah.
Did you know that Eugene's now, you can't drink at all if you're driving? Apparently it's 0 tolerance.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. I don't know if it's everywhere.
I don't know that it's everywhere either.
I'm pretty sure it's statewide.
Yeah.
Is it?
Okay, now wait a minute. There's no tolerance whatsoever, even for a citizen.
Yeah, even if you're over 21.
Yeah, well, people have died. That's why they've gotten so hardcore about it.
I heard that you can get a DUI if you're less than 0.08 if you're showing signs of intoxication, but
Yes.
I've never heard that
Yeah.
there's
Yes.
0 tolerance now.
Right. And signs of intoxication could be, you're weaving or something like that.
Right.
I mean, I'm an aggressive driver, as has been told. I'm just thinking, no, I'm from LA. I just like people doing the speed limit on the city street. Like bicycles doing 10 and 25. No, why am I behind you? Or a person in a car is doing 15 and it's 25. Okay, can you hurry it up? Yeah, really, yeah. But, but that's me under the influence of caffeine and Eugene impatience. But you're weaving, they detect that, and, they don't know, because, if they detect that there's alcohol, well, you might be drinking on top of your meds. This happens a lot, right? So for example, this story about Jimi Hendrix is the classic one. I actually believe he was murdered, but by being waterboarded with wine. But anyway, the standard story is he took 9 barbiturate tablets, and he was more powerful, and he essentially died that way. So, for example, what happens with pharmaceuticals? So, induced addiction with pharmaceuticals. You simply assume they're safe to use in any form, in any combination, without questioning that there is a dose, legally prescribed dose, that's based on the science. So, more is not better. And just because it's legal does not mean it's safe to use in any form, in any combination. So pharmaceutical, many people simply assume they're safe to use even if you don't know what they are. So that's the whole thing behind the phenomenon called farming. Grind them up, snort them, smoke them, mix and match. So generally speaking, people who do that have been doing other drugs in combination for a long time. Smoking pharmaceuticals is not something a beginner does. And I basically brought this up because, person had taken the class a few years ago. One of their friends had smoked oxys and had died. And the school had treated it like it was a suicide. And she wouldn't let them, a bunch of her and her friends wore the person's initials on their graduation caps and got kicked out of graduation, and they felt the school was going, overboard. And I'm saying, school was going from the assumption that this was misuse. Because, person just doesn't start smoking oxys, first drug that they ever do. That's not a behavior that you just start out doing as the first thing you do. Right? So it's a bigger problem than what you're willing to admit to.